Hello, this is Brian Hanley. Today's podcast, let's talk about something very, very interesting topic. The craziness of high school sports. I myself grew up in Indiana. It's right across the river from Louisville, Kentucky, but in Indiana. And we all know what that means. High school basketball. Just absolutely insane. It's bigger than even the University of Indiana basketball. I know there's a lot of Indiana fans. I know that. But high school basketball is huge. Huge. I also have the good fortune of living in Texas. And I tell everybody, the equivalent of high school basketball in Indiana is just the same way as high school football here in Texas. People absolutely lose their minds. Let's talk ball.
Broken up by Tatum. Tipped off. Michael Harris has it. Here's Short. Yes. Secretariat has opened a 22-length lead. Fly ball deep left field. Yes, there she goes. Touchdown. He did what? Yes. LeBron James. It is a grand salami. Bo Jackson unloads on this one. Touchdown. No. There's nothing real in the world anymore. No. Mike Jones made the tackle.
Wish I was 50 years younger and I'd kick you.
Ortiz in the deep right field. Down goes Crazed. He is Mr. November. Touchdown Titans. There are no flags. Curry for the lead.
Let's talk Texas high school football since I'm here. The obvious is the stadiums. There are literally $138 million worth of high school football stadiums 4 miles apart. Let me say that again, just so people understand. $138 million worth of high school football stadiums 4 miles apart. One is Allen, the other one is McKinney. 4 miles. How close they are. I used to live in McKinney. My school district was Allen. So if that doesn't tell you something. So that's where the difference is. 130, are you kidding me? 2 stadiums? And they're phenomenal. Obviously, one was 70 million, another one was 68 million. You're going to get some things that look nice. And they do. They look nice. It is great. But, whoo, boy. 4 miles? Now, Allen is one school, one city. They're the only team that plays there. They got a $68 million stadium. McKinney, there's 3 teams that play there. They got to split 3 teams. Arr. Come on now. The hell? Whew. And that's just here. That's just there. There's others. Frisco, where I live. That's the Cowboys headquarters. It's called the Star, the Ford Center. All the Frisco high schools play there. That's their home game. If I was being recruited by somebody, obviously, not a top tier Division I, but if I'm being recruited by somebody, even low tier Division I, you couldn't tell me nothing. I'd be like, look, I want to come to your school, but I see your facilities, and I played better facilities in high school, so come on now. Y'all better come with it. Whew. And it's all over the state. It's not just in Dallas. Houston, the same way. Katy, gigantic stadium. You go out west, you got Odessa, Perryman. There's one in San Antonio. San Antonio's got a good one. A big one. They're all over this Fort Worth. They're everywhere. They're everywhere. High school football. Now, one of the things, I mean, it is just nuts. One of the things that people talk about is the type of money that it takes for a program. Well, there's tons of money that just go around for these programs. And it's not just, the big power schools. It's every school has money for football. Every single one of them has money for football. All the way from your top big money school all the way down to bottom of the line, lower school, poor. It doesn't have to be inner city, so don't go that route. It could be some school out in the country too. They all have money for football. All got stadiums for football. All of them. They all have money. I mean, when I talk about money, I'm talking about when I go on the road. This was mine and my wife's first example with Texas high school football. We go to Mesquite game in Mesquite. By the way, that's another place in Mesquite, Texas. They have two stadiums. You can actually sit at the top of one and see the other one about 2 miles away. They both seat 18,000. That's just a little known fact there. So they got that going for them. So you can actually see the other one from one stadium. It's nuts. But our first encounter was we go to a game, and at halftime, the away team has their band, the whole band, okay. The dance team, okay. And the flag squad, everybody, all three different levels. Not, hey, the band and the flags together. They were together, but they all did their own separate thing. And then the home team did it. Halftime was a half hour. Literally a half hour for halftime. I'm like, this is longer than pro games. And no, it wasn't the playoffs. It was a Friday night in September. I'm like, we got home at 11 and we lived 3 miles from the stadium. Game started at 7:30. I'm like, what in the world? It is a show. I thought an NBA basketball game was a show. It was until I came to Texas high school football. Whew. It is a production. I mean, and it was good. I mean, it was good football. I'm like, my goodness, no, this is what everybody's been talking about. I get it. That is literally what I said. I'm like, I get it. I get it. I get it now. I get what everybody's been talking about. I remember I told people on Facebook that I was going, and everybody said the same thing, man. It's going to be like nothing you've ever seen in your life. I was like, come on, man. And lo and behold, whew, and that was the first thing that I thought. Come on, man. What are you talking about? I mean, shoot. I was a sophomore in high school, played in front of 35,000 people, which brings me to Indiana high school basketball. Yeah, that's right. Now, they don't anymore, but they used to play the state finals in what was called the Hoosier Dome, where the Colts played. Why did they do that? Because they had a phenom named Damon Bailey, who was going to the state finals for his senior year. Last year, he'd been twice, hadn't been able to bring it home. Little school named Bedford North Lawrence, out in the middle of Indiana. Bob Knight says that he's going to be the next thing, better than sliced bread. Damon Bailey, he could play for my team right now as an 8th grader. Says that all of a sudden, and don't get me wrong, Damon Bailey could go. Whoo! I mean, you want to say whatever you want. He got every foul. Don't get me wrong. He got every call, every foul call. You couldn't breathe in his vicinity and not get a foul called on you. But Damon Bailey could go. That white boy could play some basketball. In high school, he could go. I mean, I was there the night he gave my high school, Jeff, 51. A little 51 spot. The regional final. Whoo, my goodness. Just torched them. So they had to move the state finals to Indianapolis, or to the Hoosier Dome. It was already in Indianapolis. They had to move it to the Hoosier Dome, away from Market Square Arena, where the Pacers happened to play. And not big enough. Not big enough. 41,000 people went to go see this high school basketball game. 41,000. It was more people than the Final Four was being held in Indianapolis that year. Had more people at the Indiana High School basketball state finals than it did for the Final Four. That was literally the next weekend. That's what I'm talking about crazy. There's gyms in Indiana. For instance, I talked about the Texas stadiums. Impressive. There's the top 10 biggest high school gyms in the world, not the country, in the world. 9 of them are in Indiana. 9 of 10. Think about that. High school gymnasium, and I'm not talking about, oh yeah, it's got 4,500 people. No. I mean, Newcastle has 11,000 people for a high school, and they'll sell it out. I mean, heck, I grew up not too far from a city, Paoli, Indiana. I mean, you got to look it up, and know what you're talking about. I mean, now the one thing about it is not far from where Larry Legend grew up. Hey, French Lick, right down the road from Paoli. So it's about 45 minutes from where I grew up. You got to have a town of about 800 people. Their gym, 5,000. And that's what I'm talking about. 800 people in a town, 5,000 for their gym. And it'll be full. I mean, it's just nuts. It is just nuts. I mean, when I was in high school, we played a game. It was on Scholastic Sports America. I played a regular season game that was literally on pay-per-view television. Who the hell has heard of a basketball game in 1993 for high school on pay-per-view TV? What? And 1 million people bought it. I mean, there's 1 million people. What are you talking about? The game was broadcast all over the country. 1 million people tuned in. Now, granted, that probably gets outside of the realm of Indiana, but when you talk about a high school game was pay-per-view and 1 million people, it wasn't 1 million buys, don't get me wrong, but they said that 1 million eyes, 1 million people watched the game. I mean, I'm not going stupid with it. Oh, it's 1 million buys. Come on now. That was the estimation. 1 million people were able to see it. Well, what the hell? For a high school basketball game. That was in 1993. I mean, that's what it is like in Indiana, though. I mean, the gyms that I'm talking about, 9,000 deep. And 8,000, and it'll be packed. 8,000 for a high school basketball game. What? And that's what it's like. That's what it's like in Indiana. I mean, it is big time basketball. And I know I talked about Texas and the Crazed. Hey, it's like that in Indiana. They can talk about stuff from 40 years ago like it was yesterday. Now, you're going to say, oh, well, that happens with all sports. People can do that in every sport. They don't do that with every sport. Not at the high school level. Now, you can talk about something that happened in Super Bowl II, or something like that. This is high school. High school. And people remember it like it was yesterday. They make these movies and say these things. Oh, when old Billy Bob he was down there shooting them hoops. I remember old Billy Bob when he was about 6 years old. Boy, he came out of high school. He was knocking them down all over the place. And you talk to that man 40 years later, and he's saying the same thing. Literally the same thing. Oh, yeah, man, I remember old Billy Bob. He was a little old dyke down there shooting them jump shots. I remember I taught him a little bit. I taught Billy Bob a little bit how to shoot that jumper. I mean, I know I'm making fun of them. That's the people in my neighborhood used to say the same thing to me. Brown, I remember you growing up. You used to shoot basketball. I'm like, my God, how do you remember? I don't even remember. How do you remember this nonsense? It's Indiana basketball, man. And Texas football. The greatest football game maybe in the history of football is a Texas high school playoff game. Playing on John Tyler, come on now. And what was it? 4 onside kicks in a row that they got to get back in the game? How does that happen? You get them in a row, 4 in a row. Score touchdowns. Take the lead. And then all of a sudden on the ensuing kickoff, you decide to kick it deep. John Tyler runs it back for a touchdown, wins the game. I mean, only in Texas high school football. That's what I'm talking about. It's insane, people. They put that, I mean, the state finals, I know there's other places in other states, and we had the state finals and, and in the stadium for the professional team or the college team. You know what? But it's not the Dallas Cowboys. And as much as I loathe them, I can't stand them, and it makes me ill. Dallas Cowboys are still the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, you can go to a playoff game. First of all, they have regular season games there all the time. Well, why would you have a regular season game in Cowboy Stadium for high school football? Because you get 25,000 people to show up. That's why. And wherever you were going to have the game is not big enough. What are you talking about, Brian? On a Saturday, there might be 6 games that are at Jerry World. Starting at whatever time o'clock in the morning and go all day. You might get 200 to 250,000 people going through there for those 6 games at a minimum. That's what I'm talking about. High school football in Texas. Now, you can say, hey, Florida's got great players. California's got a ton of players. Alabama, Georgia. And they do. Not taking away anything. I'm not even here to tell you that Texas has the best high school football. That's not what this is about. Although I believe that it does. I'm not here to tell you that. I'm just talking about the Crazed. $138 million for 2 stadiums 4 miles apart. Come on. The one that I was telling you about, Mesquite, where if you sit at the top of one, you can look and it's a mile and a half away, you can see the other one. Those were built a while back. So who knows what the cost of those, but again, they're 18,000 seat stadiums. They're not, hey, one's 2,000, one's 3,000. Both of them are 18,000 a piece. Think about that for a second. 18,000 in 1979 for high school? The hell is going on? It just, whew. And that's what you think about. It's Texas high school football. And then no wonder the dad goes lunatic on the son, as a peewee player. No wonder he's going ballistic. No wonder he's going crazy. And he's a psychopath. I got to get my son in that stadium so I can see him play. He got to get in that stadium. Come on, Johnny. Let's go. Let's go. Move it. Let's go. I got to get my son in that stadium. Same way with Indiana basketball. Shoot that shot. Nope, we're going to shoot until your arm falls off. Keep shooting. Keep shooting. Keep shooting. Got to see you on Friday night. Friday night in the gymnasium. Got to see you. Got to see you. You got to be there. And for a lot of people, high school is the best time of their life. A lot of people don't go on to college and play. So if you get to play in high school and you actually do so, you can become a legend. You don't even have to play another down, another quarter. You don't have to play another second of either sport. Don't have to do it. But if you do, and you become, or if you play in high school and you become something, it is just absolutely, absolutely insane. The sports and they made a movie, for crying out loud. Friday Night Lights. They made a movie. And it was a true story. They've made several movies of football in Texas. High school football. High school football. They've made several of these in Texas. Think about that for a minute, people. Movies. Heck, arguably the greatest sports movie ever is Hoosiers. Indiana high school basketball. Again, true story. Based off of Milan. Little small school. Went to Indianapolis, won it all. I mean, when they're making movies about this kind of stuff, I mean, and again, it's not professional. This is about little Johnny had a little snot-nosed Johnny that couldn't do nothing. All of a sudden, he made the jump shot to win the big game. And we're talking about him 50 years later. You know? Little Lamont. Lamont, he caught that pass. He broke 17 tackles on his way to score a touchdown. I mean, it's nuts. And again, I love it. Oh my goodness, I love every second of it. I mean, high school football, I love it. High school basketball, I love it. It doesn't get any better. And I played in college. I never played professional. So I imagine that's on a whole nother level. But do you know how many professional guys will tell you how much fun it is to play on a Friday night? Professional football players say it all the time. There's nothing like Friday night football. Ask any of them. They'll tell you. They loved it. And these are at the top of the pinnacle. Anybody, you can argue or whatever. It doesn't get better than a Friday night playing football in Texas. It just doesn't. I don't care if you're from Florida, California, wherever, Georgia, Alabama. I'm not saying you don't play good football, but you know what? If you had a chance to play in Texas, you would do it in a heartbeat. It's just the way it is. Same thing with Indiana high school basketball. There's nothing like Friday night when you live in a town of 2,500 and the whole town shuts down to come to the game. Gym has 4,500 people and that thing is packed. There is nothing like it. I mean, there is nothing like it. Gym is just full of people. You run out on the court for the first time, the whole place screaming. I lived it, and it was glorious. You know, like I said, it's just when you think about in Texas about the money, everything's bigger in Texas. You think about it, how you have high school stadiums that are that big to play a high school football game. I mean, that's bigger. Some of these are bigger than pretty much all Division II colleges. But some are just, I mean, the Allen Stadium and the McKinney, those are just as nice as Division I stadiums. I'm not saying they're as big, but they're as nice. Katy, same thing. I mean, these places, they're just as nice as Division I stat. Come on, man. What are we talking about? This is crazy. Love it, love it, love it. And then you got the Indiana high school basketball gymnasiums. I mean, there is no reason that a town of 500 people should have a gym that seats 5,000. There is no reason for that. But it happens. And those things, like I said, whole town shuts down. Of course, they're getting people from everywhere because there are only 500 people in the town. It's like, where are all these people? That's the first thing I used to think. Where are all these people coming from? Like, where are you coming from? I mean, you drive in, doesn't have a stoplight. You drive into the school, you see this big monstrosity, you see the school, and then connected to it is this gigantic building. And then all of a sudden, the place is full, and you're like, there was 11 people in this town, and there's 4,500 people here. What the hell is going on? People coming from everywhere. It's just, it's something that you gotta see. It's like a bucket list. It's like a bucket list type of thing. Yeah, I'm going to go to an Indiana high school basketball game. And just go to one. Go to one. I was spoiled, I admit. I grew up Jeffersonville. Jeffersonville is known for basketball, always good. New Albany, our arch rival, always good. Both gyms, huge for high school basketball, always huge. 5,000 each, the stadium. And lo and behold, that's what I grew up with. That's what I mean. And going all the time, I used to go as a kid. It was always packed. Big game, small game, didn't matter. Small game, you're getting 3,500. Big game sold out, 5,000. It's just the way it was. Things are different now. They went to class. Basketball, when I played, it was, hey, we got one champ. One. The year we won the state finals, you can say, oh, it's not fair. It's not fair. The year we won the state finals, we had to beat a team that had 4 Division I players on it, and the size of the school was 325. 4 Division I players in a school that had 325 people in it. We had to beat them in the semi-state, beat them by 2. We had 2,200 in our school. So don't tell me about how good or how unfair and all that nonsense was. That's what we did. That's Indiana high school basketball. That's Hoosier hysteria for you right there. And I mean, now it's different, but you can still go to a game. The games and the gyms are all still the same. It's nuts. Be interesting to see what's next when it comes to all this. What comes next? Because now you got certain, like I said, especially here in Texas, you got some of these schools now, you know, consolidations and with the football fields. I mean, they're there. Now what are you going to do? I mean, can you go bigger? Are more going to get them? And how much? Whoo, it's a lot of money. 138, I mean, 70 million for a football stadium. 70 million. Whew. I mean, that can $70 million buys a lot of textbooks. And I'm not saying that the priorities aren't out of whack. But the one thing that I haven't really heard is once it gets built, is a whole bunch of people complaining about it being there. So one thing that I haven't really heard is complaining that, oh man, they wasted a bunch of money. Now you hear a little bit of that before it actually gets up and gets done. But you don't really hear any of that after the fact. You don't really hear any of that at all, to be matter of fact. And that's one of the things that is, to me, is mind-boggling. Usually something, it would be super controversial and all this. When Allen built their stadium, it was a little bit, but what did it lead to? They won 3 state championships in a row, didn't lose a game for 3 years. You didn't hear a peep. Didn't hear a peep. I mean, I think they've won 5 in 7 years or something like that. I mean, it's, you know, constituted into winning. People loved it. McKinney, I don't know if the same thing is going to hold true because they don't have as stronger teams, but I do know that they just held the national championship for Division II football. Was at the stadium. It's brand new, and it was there. There's some revenue. It just Texas football, boy. Indiana high school basketball. Again, I'm not saying that the other states aren't good. I'm not even saying that the other states are better. But when it comes to crazy fan hoopla, I'm not sure what is better or what's worse. I'm just not sure of it. When it comes to that, don't know that it even exists. Don't know that it'll ever exist. And I don't know that I want it to exist in other places. I think it's great that these two stand out. Makes them unique. Big state like Texas, football. Indiana's not a big state. Yeah, tell that to a high school basketball fan. In the words of my brother Robert, aloha.
Let's Talk Ball is produced by myself, Brian Hanley, and Darren Howard at Mach 1 Productions. Editing, music, intro, graphic design, cover art are also done by our Director of Operations, Darren Howard at Mach 1 Productions. Research, fact-checking by myself, Brian Hanley. The Let's Talk Ball podcast is brought to you by the LTB Network.